We're about to see so many brand new quirks in My Hero Academia Season 6 that there's no possible way to keep track of every single one, right? Well, look no further, because in this video we're going to discuss every single new quirk that we're going to see in My Hero Academia Season 6. And we're keeping the daily upload train going. Sorry for the slightly late upload today. It is my birthday, so thank you for any birthday wishes that I do get in the comment section below. But you could also just hit that subscribe button. I'll take that as a birthday wish, or you could hit the like button. I'll take that also. But even that is not a good enough reason to miss an upload, so let's get straight to it with the first new quirk that we're going to be seeing in My Hero Academia Season 6 being the Doctor's quirk, Life Force. Now, we've seen the Dr. Cute Eye Garaki, or I guess Daruma Ujiko is the name we know him by so far in the story. We've seen him a couple times, very few times throughout the events of My Hero Academia. Once in the very beginning when he gave Deku a quirk exam, and then later on we saw his character quite a bit surrounding the All for One plotline, until we saw him last season during My Villain Academia, right, when he lent a hand to Shigaraki and the rest of the League of Villains by letting them have access to Makia, his lab, and a couple resources so they're not just out there poor and in the field. And now that the villains do have the help of the Meta Liberation Army and they've all kind of become the Paranormal Liberation Front, the Doctor still is very much a big threat that has to be dealt with within the organization that Shigaraki runs. So at the very beginning of the season, we are going to have to deal with him, and his quirk Life Force allows him to pretty much stop aging, right? Like, he lives for a very long time, I believe, because I don't think it's like outright immortality. Honestly, I don't think it's like 100%, but I just think you age so slowly that it's negligible, because we know that he's apparently over 120 years old, right? But it doesn't rid you of all side effects of aging, because according to Dr. Garaki, it kind of lessens his ability to move around quickly or be agile as a kind of drawback to his quirk. Alright, so the next quirk belongs to Crust, and Crust's quirk is called Shield. And at first, with a name like Crust, I was expecting him to have some sort of like crazy Earth technique where he just lifted the crust of the planet. You know, that's the kind of stuff that I expect for the top 10 heroes. But actually, his quirk Shield allows him to kind of form structures from his body, these kind of like weird scales that come from his body that he can then use to form stuff like big circular blades, right, that kind of form around him like two big giant Captain America shields. And definitely keep your eye on Crust, because Crust is going to have a very interesting section in the beginning of this arc, so keep your eye on that character because you're not going to want to miss it. This next character I know everyone's going to be keeping their eye on, and it's Mirko, and we're going to talk about Mirko's quirk, which we've seen a little tiny bit if you count Mirko jumping into the fight right when Dabi was about to fight Endeavor. That's not really anything. We didn't really get to see her pop off like we're going to see in this season, and Mirko's quirk is called, obviously, Rabbit. And that pretty much, the simple way to explain it is how the manga explains it, right? Which is that it lets her do anything that a rabbit could do, but better. Because obviously she's a human, so like how Spider-Man can do all the things that a spider can do, but he's better because it's a spider multiplied by a human, Mirko is effectively the same. It gives her elite agility, amazing strength, she can do crazy kicks, and it's not just like physical abilities, right? Because we know that she also seems to have like a killer instinct, or at least like an animal instinct, where she instantly saw Shigaraki and knew that he was extremely dangerous just by what her instincts were telling her. The next quirk comes from Chubs, the High End Nomu. We've already talked about the high ends in another video, so if you want to see me go way more in depth, you can go watch that video where I discuss every High End Nomu's quirks. But just to include them in this video, because they are new quirks that we're going to be seeing, I'll go over them very quickly. So we have Chubs, the High End Nomu, whose quirk is Expansion, which allows him to kind of expand his body and get puffy, even though his skin is very durable and hard to pierce through because he is a very strong Nomu. He also has metal teeth, which allowed him to bite through pieces of Crust's shield, so they're very strong. Alongside him, we have Ribby, which is another High End Nomu, and one of his quirks is that he has ribs that can protrude from his body, and we don't have literal names for any of their quirks, by the way, so I've just given them interesting names. Like Ribby's rib bone quirk is called Rib Bone Blades, because we see him cover his body in ribs, and the only other thing we've seen him do is use the head tentacle that he has, and yeah, that's the other quirk that he has, which is Head Tentacle. Couldn't come up with a cool name for that one. It's a head tentacle. We also have Elf, which is the giant elephant High End Nomu, and his quirks are Elephant, which you could imagine just multiplies a person by an elephant. It's sort of like Mirko's quirk, but it's an elephant instead, which is actually really horrifying. when you think about it. And the other quirk that the elf High End Nomu has is Armed, which allows the High End Nomu to grow its arms and forearms to a much larger size. After that, we have Robot, the High End Nomu that has a big metallic shield on its head. That robot straight up just has Kamui, where it can kind of warp away certain things using its hands instead of its eyes, because I'm sure Horikoshi didn't want to be too derivative, but it can warp things away like body parts or just things that it sees by putting its hand in front of itself, turning it, and it kind of creates like a little warp hole that sends things away just like Kamui does. And that kind of makes me wonder if this thing has its own Kamui dimension. We need to explore that a little more. And the other quirk that Robot has is Laser Eyes, because Horikoshi had to find a way to give this thing red eyes since it has Kamui. And rounding out the list on High End Nomu, we have Woman, who is a very threatening and intelligent High End Nomu that almost took some of the heroes out of commission, and her quirks are Rupture, which allows her to blow up parts of her body, and Liquefaction, which allowed her to turn her body into liquid. So the combination of those two things, you could tell, would be very interesting. Moving on from the list, we have Cementos, and I know what you're going to say. We've seen Cementos' quirk before, but really throughout the series, we've only seen Cementos kind of make walls or do little things. But in this arc, I promise you that Cementos is going to use his quirk in a very, very different way, kind of using more of like a wet cement thing or like blowing buildings open, just doing very interesting things that we haven't seen him do before because we haven't seen Cementos get angry. And I also promise I'm not going to fill this list of old quirks, right? You don't have to click off and think, oh, now he's going to do everyone whose quirk we've ever seen before. I just really wanted to add Cementos in because I do feel like he used his quirk in a different way than we've ever seen, and also he carried me pretty hard in the Ultra Rumble beta. And of course, Cementos' quirk Cement allows him to pretty much control cement and harden it or create different constructs with it, and apparently it allows him to use his cement to interact with other cement and then gain control over that cement. So he could literally just tear apart a building that you're in if you have cement in your walls. From there, we have the unnamed Paranormal Liberation Front commander who uses an electrical quirk. I believe his electrical quirk is called Amplivolt, and this is a person that we're going to see pretty early on in the season when we see the heroes going over to the mansion. And it's kind of the opposite of Kaminari's quirk, where Kaminari's quirk allows him to generate electricity and kind of output it, but not in a specific direction or way. This quirk allows the user to conduct electricity instead and then amplify it further, so they can do something like put a taser against their own chest and then turn that into various attacks that they can then amplify and shoot out giant electrical bursts in a more shaped and triggered way, right? Because we even saw this villain turn his hands or surround his hands in kind of like electric-like gloves, kind of like Luck from Black Clover. After that, there was like a random hero I just wanted to mention who could just make rocks from his body, like just make boulders and rocks come out of his body, and he used it to fill one of the exits that the villains had that, you know, they couldn't get out from now. And I don't know, I wanted to mention that guy because just makes rocks. He could really make a killing just selling pet rocks. After that, we have Eel Boy. Great hero name, Eel Boy. It's like he unironically stands Barnacle Boy. And Eel Boy's quirk allows him to pretty much summon two kind of weird ghostly or solid eels from his hands, kind of like how Tokoyami has Dark Shadow coming from parts of his body. And he can use these two eels to then like wrap around or bite down on enemies to capture them and bring them back to prison. After that, we have Exlis's quirk, and Exlis's quirk is Laser, which is a laser that he can shoot out of his eye. I think that's the only place that he can shoot the laser from. Like, he can't shoot lasers out of all of his fingertips or anything. So his costume does put a big emphasis on the eye. And yeah, Exlis is another character who definitely is going to have a very, very big moment in this arc. I like how Horikoshi is taking certain side characters and really giving them a lot of interesting focus and interesting scenes. And I really like some of the commentary that Exlis gets into in this arc. So just keep a big eye on him, or I guess keep your laser eye on him. And Exlis is definitely going to surprise you. After that, we have All For One's quirk, which is the original All For One. And we could kind of draw a conclusion that this would be the case. Apparently, there is a copy of All For One, and there's an original All For One, right? And the only clue that we've had up until this point that this was happening is that All For One showed up to Kamino with a completely different loadout of quirks than what he originally used against Prime All Might, which was a hint to us that he was instead using a copy of All For One instead of the main All For One quirk that Shigaraki is getting in this arc. So after All For One, we have another nameless Paranormal Liberation Front commander who has a quirk that allows him to create holes. I don't think we know anything more than that. We see him kind of creating large circular holes in the ice that Getten was making on the battlefield to try to sneak up on Gang Orca. And he does have various holes on his body, but maybe those are like self-made piercings or something like that, and we don't know how the quirk works beyond, you know, they probably have to touch something and then a giant hole appears there, because there are a lot of touch-based quirks that do things like that. Now after that we have Shigaraki's new quirks, and we're going to go through those pretty quickly because I also have a video discussing all of the new quirks that Shigaraki's going to get, so you can click the card in the top right and go look for that. And Shigaraki's new quirks are Air Cannon, which I actually missed in that video. And Air Cannon is a quirk that allows him to pretty much shoot a giant air blast out of his hands, and we did see that quirk when All For One used it against All Might, I believe, during their fight in Kamino, but it's new to Shigaraki, right? And Shigaraki uses it very differently and effectively, so I think it deserved a mention here. After that we have Search, which is another quirk which is not new overall, but is new to Shigaraki, and that's the quirk that belongs to the Pussycat doll who lost her powers, and now it allows Shigaraki to look around the battlefield and see where certain characters are, what their weaknesses are, and how far away from them they are, or how close they are, along with what quirk they're wielding, I believe. So he pretty much knows exactly who someone is when he looks in their direction and how far away they are. After that he has Radio Waves, which is a quirk that allows him to pretty much control the High End Nomu and also disrupt all of the heroes' communications. And finally, Shigaraki has Rivet Stab, which is the kind of long, dark, and red fingers that we saw All For One using against All Might and Gran Torino during the All For One versus All Might fight. After that, the story reveals to us Kito's quirk, Traject, which allows him to use bandages to pretty much redirect any fire, so he could take a fireball that's thrown at him and redirect it, and I believe it comes out of his bandages a little stronger than when it initially went in, right? So this is a very good combo to use with Endeavor, who can then fly through the hoops and be redirected by Kito. Majestic is the hero that Momo trained with during her internship, in the most recent internships at least, and his quirk Magic, which we all thought was going to be like some crazy Doctor Strange stuff, is actually a bunch of like rings that he can create from his hands, and the rings can be various different sizes, and they serve as kind of floating rings that can carry things or send them flying, and it seems like Majestic can actually make a lot of them and carry some decently heavy things with them, so you know, it just gives you the ability to make platforms for people that can fly around. Big whoop. After that we have a couple of Deku's quirks like Float, which he unlocked from Nana Shimura in this season, and Float is a quirk that I believe allows you to just kind of maintain in air without falling, but also sometimes I feel like it's an actual just straight up flying quirk, right? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And the other quirk that Deku unlocks in this war arc is Danger Sense, which is pretty much like another Spider Sense more or less, which warns Deku of any danger and tells him if there's bad vibes around more or less, or if someone means some harm, and you can learn all about all the quirks that Deku unlocks in this arc in full detail, again, by clicking the card in the top right and going to my Every New Quirk Deku Unlocks video, because I feel like we're really covering all our bases of our Season 6 content. Next up is Wash's quirk, Clean Bubbler, which allows Wash to pretty much generate bubbles from the giant washing machine that's at the center of his body, and these bubbles can be used for various different things, like floating people inside the bubbles, they're actually really quite durable, or even using them to kind of give the heroes to disinfect wounds if they're going to apply medical aid to other heroes when they're damaged. So it's more or less a full-on capture quirk, but we have seen that Wash can use a lot of water and a lot of bubbles and make them come out of that center kind of door, I guess, or washing machine door that he has on his chest, so I'm sure it goes a little further than just being able to use singular bubbles on targets. After Wash, we have a very suspicious quirk from All For One. All For One has this random telekinesis quirk that he uses to carry around the life support system next to him, and it very much reminds me of Deku's mom's quirk, right? Every once in a while, All For One just has a quirk that it's like, why do you have that, right? Or that kind of reminds me of another quirk in the story, but this quirk more than any kind of reminded me a lot of Deku's mom's quirk, or sort of like Ochako's quirk to another extent. And this is also around the time that Deku unlocks Smokescreen, which I believe is the 6th user's quirk. And Smokescreen does exactly what you would picture. It pretty much turns Deku into a walking smoke grenade. He can just exude smoke from his body in all directions, or even large poofs of smoke that could cover entire city blocks. And it's a really effective tool for hiding in, even though if an enemy is outside of the giant Smokescreen, it's not really all that effective, right? Because they could just cover all the exits with their vision. After that, we have Lady Nagant's quirk, which is Rifle, and Lady Nagant is going to be a very interesting villain that I do think we are going to get to in this season. I do think we are going to cover the Dark Deku arc, and I'm going to stay with that. I've been saying it ever since my Hero Academia how many chapters are going to be in the season video, and I'm going to hold true to it. So I do think we're going to see Lady Nagant or Lady Nagant, and we're going to see her quirk Rifle, which turns her arm into a massive rifle, and she can use her hair to turn that into bullets that she can then control to a certain extent, which is pretty amazing, and it's one of the things that makes her one of the best snipers in all all of My Hero Academia, I believe, even having Snipe kind of calling out how amazing she is. But the other quirk that she has, which makes her extremely dangerous in this arc, is Airwalk, which it's pretty simple. She can just walk in the air, right? And she can get to different rooftops or different positions that a sniper wouldn't normally be able to get up to if their only quirk was just a shooting quirk, right? She had to figure out how to manually get to situations or positions before, and now she can do various different things because she can just walk on the air. Almost at the end here, we have Deku's last quirk that we've seen him unlock so far, which is Fajin, and I have a really good explanation for Fajin in my Deku video that I explained before, but more or less you can understand it as being an energy converter in Deku's body, right? He can convert momentum that he generates with his movements into energy that he can then use to add a multiplier to his power to make him even stronger, sort of like a Kaioken, right? But he has to build it up with energy that he generates from just moving around or doing repeated movements. And finally, we have Dictator's quirk. And Dictator is an assassin that we see All For One send after Deku, and Dictator's quirk is pretty much Doflamingo's power to a lesser extent, right? Where he can take his threads from his body and put them into various people all around him and control them while they have complete consciousness of what they're doing. So he can take a large group of people in the random middle of the street and turn them into a large army to do crimes, and they know what they're doing the entire time, and they're crying and asking for help, and it's really dark. And that's a dark note to end on, but that is it, folks. That's every single new quirk that we're gonna see in My Hero Academia Season 6. I gathered all of them, and yeah, let me know if you appreciated it. Let me know if you enjoyed learning about every single one, or if you want another My Hero Academia Season 6 kind of like explaining everything video. If you want me to explain all the quirks in general, like every quirk we're gonna see, let me know. I'll see you guys later. It's Pineapple. See you tomorrow. Fresh uploads every day, keeping the daily train going. Sorry for being a little late again, but I appreciate you guys for supporting the channel, and yeah, peace.